Can you guys introduce Mommy?
Spill the beans with Dr. Jill.
So, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us today on Spill the Beans with Dr. Jill. I have a very special guest, and I'm inviting him to introduce himself, and then I'll talk a little bit about how I know him.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Russ Smith. I'm the Director of First Generation Support and Engagement at Hofstra University here on Long Island.
Thank you, Russ. It's so exciting. This is the first time that I've been able to be on the platform with Dr. Smith since he essentially defended a couple years ago now, right?
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, very exciting. So we first met when we were hall directors at Southern Connecticut State University, right?
Mhm.
Is it fair to say that most of your background is in residential life?
Yeah, I worked in res life for all but the last year and a half of my career, which has been about 22 years, I think.
Yeah, we don't need to tell each other our ages. That's fine.
Yeah.
So
Well, I started when I was 12, so.
well, tell me, what have you known about vicarious trauma before I started researching and telling you that that's what I was going to do?
I don't remember hearing the term at all before you talking to me about what you were going to research. And so, like, I knew that there was some baggage associated with people who did Title IX work or people who responded to Title IX situations. And I experienced a little bit of that myself, and I know that I've seen that in colleagues and in student staff as well. And so, we didn't have the terminology for that. And the first time I understood that that was like a thing that had been researched, a thing that existed in a title was when you talked about it with me.
Very cool. Have you ever been able to attend one of my workshops?
I have, yeah. You did something for the SUNY system, and Hofstra partners with them for our training. So I got to participate.
Wonderful. Was there anything new that you learned or any ahas that you had to validate your experience from the workshop?
I think in going through the workshop, just the breadth of what you covered and the way that you talked about how, or the way that you talked about the way that experience of vicarious trauma might permeate multiple levels of your personal life outside of the job at home. I had, thought lightly about that, but I hadn't really thought deeply about just how much it affects people once they leave the office and continue on in their life.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I like to talk about all the time.
Yeah.
Tell me about in your role right now, are you observing a lot of support and collegiality around vicarious trauma, or do you also have an experience of naysayers and individuals who might not think it impacts them? What are you kind of seeing in the field of residence life right now?
Well, I'm not directly in residence life right now, but I am still part of the duty structure for the on-call rotation at the university. And I'm thinking about my time here when I was also in residence life over the years. Something I think we had both. I do think that people recognize that, this work can be heavy and responding to students and responding to situations and carrying their stories with you, especially in a vacuum where you can't share any of that information, can really take a toll on a person. I personally experienced a lot of heaviness, I guess I would say, because when I first started here, um, it was typical for like wide details of cases to be discussed in like cares meetings, not cares meetings, and like weekly response team meetings.
Sure.
And so more than I think probably needed to be shared was being shared. And then also as one of the three administrators who was responsible for all things that happened on campus and residence life, we also would receive full reports of everything that happened on campus. And so even if I wasn't directly involved in a case, I still would be reading reports out at, the store on the weekend. I'd get a report and read about something that happened to a student that I know and care about. And so there became places on campus that for me that were hard to visit. There became places and students that were hard to interact with. I have an experience of like being in a mall, 45 minutes away and seeing someone that, had been in a report and like just really trying to hide from that person, like leaving a store and going someplace else just so that I didn't have to interact with them because they didn't know what I knew. And so, yeah, that became very heavy. And there is a take care of yourself, do what you need to do mentality around this topic, but I don't know that we do a really great job of talking about it in depth and providing training about how to handle these things before you actually experience them.
Yeah, I mean, that leads me to, my next question is how would you advise that people take care of themselves? Has there been some gem that you're doing or that you have colleagues doing or even that you've had staff do that's been successful for nurturing their vicarious trauma?
Well, I think the best advice that I could give is when I found myself in these situations where these details were being shared widely in a meeting of campus leaders, and also when I was the recipient of all of these reports that were coming in every week, I actually advocated to my supervisor that I don't think we need to be sharing this level of information. I don't think I need to be receiving every report that comes on campus. I'd really like to opt out of that to the degree that it's possible. I am, a Title IX deputy, and so there's a bit of a gray area there that I think this the perception is why would you be willing to be in this role if you're not willing to constantly confront the things that happen in this role. And there is something different between, being on when it's my turn to be on and responding to a student when it's my turn and getting information all the time, every day that you don't necessarily need to see. I also think that there's something to be said for the privacy of the student. They don't like there's no need for all of this information to be shared. And so in advocating to my supervisor, who then advocated on my and her behalf, we were able to kind of clamp down the amount of information that was being shared, both in those meetings and also who went to those meetings. And also, we no longer need to get every report of anything that happens on campus. If the Title IX coordinator thinks that I need to be in the know, she pulls me in, and I'm very happy with that.
Yeah, that's great advice. And one of the things I talk about during the workshop and with colleagues that are in similar fields to us with residence life is that you can't always elect to not check your email, right? And so that's a component of the job. And how do you balance the information coming in and coming out? So I think it's an amazing testament to be able to say, this is a limitation that I want to set for my boundary and be able to say, I could still be effective in my role, but this is going to have to work for me. And that advocacy is so important. Talk to us a little bit about the work that you're doing. I would love to share the nuances of your research because I do have this kind of collaboration of your research and mine. I don't even know if you realize, but yeah, tell us, what did you research?
Well, so I'm a first generation college student myself and had very much had the classic experience of not knowing what I didn't know going to college and kind of crash banging my way through it. And while I was very much a first gen student in undergrad, it really didn't hit me. It didn't hit me how out of depth I was until I was at grad school. I'm from a very small town in the Midwest and I went to NYU. And when I was there for grad school, sorry, can I just pause for 1 second? While I was in grad school, the people around me were from very famous institutions and were all from the coast. And so I very much felt like I was out of my depth there and really didn't understand how things worked on the East Coast and with people that had been to just very different types of institutions than I had been. So, I was working at Southern with Jill at Southern Connecticut State University and was really working with a lot of students that were much like I was. And it kind of clicked for me. I was, working to build living learning communities, and I thought, why couldn't we do a living learning community that was all for first generation students? And then I could kind of stack the deck. The night before they would have to register for classes, we'd pull in a colleague from advising and do programs right in the hall to help them get ready. And so I left Southern for Hofstra right after the first semester of that community. And so I had the opportunity to do that work again at Hofstra in residence life. And we started a work group of individuals that wanted to support first gen students. And so when I was thinking about what I wanted to study for my dissertation, I thought, well, we have this really great community. I'd really love to know, does that community have an impact on a first gen student's sense of belonging? Does it have an impact on their positive sense of first gen identity? Does it make them more or less comfortable with faculty and administrators? And so I researched that for my dissertation and found it a mystery living learning community at a school in the Northeast that ultimately such a community was very effective in helping a first gen student feel a positive sense of first identity early on in their first semester. And compared to other first gen students who either lived on campus or who commuted, they had a positive interactions with faculty, multiple positive interactions with faculty in the first semester, whereas their colleagues or their peers who commuted or who lived on campus elsewhere didn't have any positive interactions with faculty at all unless they were in one of our other institutional cohort programs like the Honors College or something similar.
Right.
So that's been my research, and that led to this position and opening of a first gen office.
So I have to assume, and I could be completely wrong, but I feel like with a title in an office as such, that opens up a door for individuals to come and share more so than if that title and that office didn't exist. Is it
Yeah.
possible that you're hearing more stories from individuals of their lived experience just because you've created this easy access pathway and this brand of you're like the first gen guru?
I do have a group of students that have connected with me and through our various programs come and hang out and like we'll sort of camp out in my office and that can be talking about a personal problem, that can be talking about a problem with a professor, that could be I need help with this paper, like help me figure it out. And so this office is definitely a jack of all trades situation. Also, this last fall, I started teaching a University 101 first gen seminar specifically for first gen students. And so that gave me also a small group of students that kind of see my office and me as home base, which is great. It's doing exactly what we hoped it would. And so those students often will pop in. I have not had an incident that I can think of yet where one of my students specifically divulged Title IX related information, but I have had students divulge other very traumatic personal details that
Yeah.
carry a lot of the same feelings of heaviness.
And one of the things that I think the viewers need to know is that Russ by nature is very humble and you do not brag at all about the work that you're doing. And I'm reading publications and ways that Hofstra is shining the work that you're doing. I don't know that you know it, but by proxy of this role, you are absorbing more vicarious trauma. And it might not be the magnitude as you referenced to Title IX cases. One of the things that's important with vicarious trauma is that what is significant to one student might be minimal to another student and vice versa. So it's not so much about the gravitas of the trauma, but how that student feels connected to it. And you being in this role is going to be so supportive for students, and you will absorb more vicarious trauma just by the nature of the job. And I know that you're prepared to deal with it and you have tons of resources and can always give me a call. But if you had one word or one phrase of wisdom to give to others to spill the beans, what would you do? What would you say?
I would, in this particular context, I would say empathy is the word. That to remember that whatever a student is interacting with you about, it is very important to them. And no matter where you are in your daily schedule, no matter what email or phone call is knocking at your door, that student is chosen despite the fact that they are probably intimidated by faculty and staff to talk with you and to share that information with you. And so like you need to honor that and to be open with them and to receive whatever it is that they're giving you.
Thank you, Russ. It was lovely to have you on Spill the Beans. We appreciate you and your service. You're doing great work. We're so lucky to have you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jill.
Hi, everyone. I hope that you enjoyed the time that I got to spend with Dr. Russ Smith today on Spill the Beans with Dr. Jill. One of the takeaways that I took from the conversation was this idea of empathy. So, vicarious trauma is this fundamental change that occurs when you're hearing empathetic stories of trauma. And so, there's a definite correlation between the amount of empathy that you're able to give and the amount of vicarious trauma that you absorbed. So, one thing that I am struck by is this idea that a caring professional is an empathetic professional and is empathetic all of the time. And I would push back on that. I do think that we need to scale back and refuel, recharge. We know this because other institutions, other organizations, other professions have best practices to instill this idea of empathy. So, for example, law enforcement, if they have a traumatic situation, they go and review best practices with EAP or, that kind of support. Other kinds of support with social workers is not taking too many clients in one day, right? Even for healthcare, there's an emergency room where healthcare offices have to close at a certain hour of the day, and therefore their backup is emergency calls. So I share this to say that this idea that we always have to be on, always have to be available, and always be empathetic is not accurate. It's not healthy. And that's why we always have plan Bs, right? That's why we always have somebody else that can be on call, somebody else that could be in the rotation. And it's really important that everyone here, including myself, understands that taking that time for yourself, it is not a discredit of how hard of a worker you are, but more of a necessity because of the hard work that you do. So that's my reflection of talking with Russ today. I hope it was helpful. It was so nice to see everybody. Bye bye.